I'd like you to join me in welcoming today's keynote speaker, which is Dr. Sam Clovis, Jr. Dr. Clovis was born and raised in central Kansas before leaving home for the United States Air Force Academy. Upon graduation, Dr. Clovis entered pilot training and remained a fighter pilot, flying jets like the F-4 and F-16 in the Air Force for 25 years. He retired as a colonel and the Inspector General of NORAD and the United States Space Command. And just going away from the script just for a second, I want to honor the vets. Dr. Clovis, can you stand up? And all of the vets in this room, can you please stand up and be recognized? Thank you, and a couple of you have heard this, but this is really special to me, and actually my mother is here listening to me speak for the first time ever. She named me after a friend of my father that died in Vietnam, and I wear this a lot, and it's special to me. So I want to thank you for standing and honoring the vets that are here. So thank you. Dr. Clovis, upon retirement from the Air Force, served in the private sector in a variety of roles. He served as the National Co-Chair and Chief Policy Advisor for the Donald J. Trump for President campaign, was a policy director during the transition period after the election, and is now serving as the Senior White House Advisor to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sam Clovis.
Well, those are bright lights. It's wonderful. Thanks for having me here today. I know that you all probably put in a bid to get the president, and he's got a big job tonight. You probably wanted the Secretary of Purdue. He's got a big job tonight, so you have to settle for me. So I wanted to come out here and introduce myself a little bit to you. I had the opportunity as a young man to be able to be raised in a great home. I had a great family, and I lived in the country. It was a small village in the country. My father was not a farmer. He worked for a power company and was a local postmaster. So we had, all of our neighbors came to our house twice a day, and literally the post office was in our house. And so it was really remarkable. That was back in the day when we had two-time mail delivery twice a day, and the best part about that was I only had to walk about 200 yards to go hunting and about 400 yards to go fishing. So I spent most of my youth, when I wasn't working, either with a fishing pole or a gun in my hands. That all worked until I went off to, got involved in sports and was a pretty good athlete and a better student, and had the opportunity to serve this country for 25 years on active duty. I had a remarkable career. And then I decided to get into the business world, and was fairly successful at that. Decided I didn't have enough education. Decided to go to the University of Alabama to get my doctorate, and became a college professor. And so I've had about 5 careers. Not the least of which was getting plucked off of a college campus to serve as the National Co-Chair and Chief Policy Advisor to the future President of the United States. That was a remarkable experience. One of the things that I used to get to do when I was in that capacity was to introduce the candidate out on the road. And I was the only surrogate that had my own music. As you know, the president had theme music when he was introduced, and I was the only surrogate that would have theme music to go out there. And I was asked one day by the event planner, or chief event planner, said, "What is your favorite musician?" And I said, "Well, my favorite musician is Meatloaf." And that's really a guy, by the way. It's a for those of you that know Michael Aday, who's a tremendous singer, and he said, well, what's your favorite song? And I said, well, Bat Out of Hell, of course. And so I would always be introduced with the music from Bat Out of Hell playing, and then I'd go out and then get the chance to introduce the future president of the United States. Pretty exciting experience for me. And I think because I was from Iowa and because of my background in education, I chose not to go into the White House when we won the election. I did work in transition. I was the policy director for all of our programs there. And we had the opportunity to go in. I led the team in at the Department of Agriculture, and I'm very proud to be there and very happy to serve. As many of you know, I probably was I was up for another position at the time, and as has been told to everyone in the United States, I am not a scientist, so just so you all know that. And those of you that have been kept up on that know what I'm talking about. So I have some sense of humor about that. But what I have been, and I always will be, is a militant conservationist. I have been my whole life. I think it all started when I first found this little 1 or 2 acre pond in a field, spring-fed, so had open water year-round. And it was the opportunity for me to see 4 seasons of that pond change, and the wildlife that came there, and the habitat. And the preservation of that became very important to me because that became a focal point of my excursions away from the house. Whether I had a fishing rod or a gun, it didn't matter. I would go out there, and I always appreciated that, and that's where I learned to love the land, not what we did in the fields where I worked tirelessly and through most of my youth, but what we did in preserving the habitat for our wildlife and our fisheries. That became a passion of mine and has remained a passion of mine my entire life. So when I had the opportunity to go to work at the Department of Agriculture, one of the first places I started to focus my attention was on our conservation efforts there. And contrary to popular belief, this administration believes strongly in big data and big science. And we are going to use big data and big science to make our decisions to help us reinforce and continue the conservation programs that we have in existence today, and in fact to enhance those so that your job and my job and the job of the Natural Resources Conservation Service will be easier over time so that we can serve more people, get more people involved in precision agriculture, work harder on productivity and sustainment and resilience in our agricultural outputs. A lot of this is going to have to come about because of the changes that we're going through. Every administration changes. And I want to cover briefly the priorities of this administration, and then I will talk a little bit more about NRCS. I know this isn't the most dramatic and funniest presentation you're ever going to get, so bear with me as we talk a little bit about where we are with this administration. The one thing I will say about this president is that he charged us to make sure that he kept his promises, and we're doing our best to do that. So tax reform has had a tremendous impact already. For those of you that are invested in the stock market, whether it be through a mutual fund or a 401k or whatever your circumstances are, we've seen the highest rise in the value of that stock market in the history of this country. The tax reform is leading us to a level of prosperity that has not been seen since the Reagan years. And I think this is something that I think all of us will benefit from, because we will have people out there that will have more disposable income, we'll see more recreation, we'll see more of the factors that we see in our economy that indicate to us that we are thriving and we're going to thrive on an international stage. So that leads me to trade. Trade is one of the biggest issues that we're confronting right now, and one of those things, a lot of people are concerned about where we stand on NAFTA. We're right now very deeply involved in negotiations on NAFTA. They're going extremely well, and I think what it is it's time to hit the reset button for a lot of these trade arrangements, and that's what we're doing. Agriculture will always benefit from trade, and we don't see any reason for that to change. Regulatory reform is an incredibly important piece of this. This is led not only in the private sector, that we see tremendous amount of gain on an economic basis, but also in the fact that it's bringing back freedom to the people of this country, and that's what this country is all about, is liberty and freedom. So regulatory reform is very important for that. You'll hear tonight in the State of the Union a message that comes very strong about a safe, strong, and proud America. And in order to do that, we have to have a strong national defense, we have to invest in infrastructure, and we have to finally get our arms around immigration reform. Those are the things that you'll likely hear tonight from the President. As you know, Secretary Perdue has a theme. It says, do right and feed the world. And what this means is we're going to go out and do those things, make common sense a prevalent factor in Washington. As many of you know, that is probably more precious than titanium in most places. In Washington, D.C., common sense is not typically the coin of the realm, and we try to bring that in this administration. But we're also talking about one USDA, making the Department of Agriculture one across the board so that we have a common culture, a common way to do things, and a common way to face our customers, the farmers, ranchers, and foresters that exist around the United States. We're going to focus on those things to make sure that we're doing our part out there so that all of us can be partners in preserving the great resources of this country. You'll find my focus has always been on healthy soil and clean water. I really got involved in studying the water issues many years ago, and I found that it was one of the most intriguing aspects of this country was all of the different issues associated with our clean water efforts. We have to make sure that we have healthy soil and clean water, or the rest of this doesn't matter. And the way we do that is through conservation measures and bringing conservation to our producers. This is one of the things that we have to do as a department, is to have a stronger interface with our customers, our ranchers, our farmers, and our foresters. You represent a partnership that we have that is very strong and very positive. Through your efforts, we have been able to make sure that we have continued our conservation programs, but it's also through your efforts that we want to strengthen them. We see as we go forward here, the opportunity for us to do a great deal to strengthen conservation across the United States. We think this is one of the most important factors that we have going. Soil stability, treatment of our forest, treating of invasive species, dealing with a lot of the other issues that we have out there that impact our ability to produce at the levels we need to have repeatable crops year after year, and at the same time be able to absorb the shocks that come into that system, sustainability and resilience. Precision agriculture is the way we have to go with that. So we need a stronger message. And one of the things that's very important is look around this audience. Look at the age of the people that are involved here. Where are we going to gain the human capital to come in and take your place? How are we going to do that? We need a stronger investment in education. I'm so delighted to hear the president of the Tennessee FFA up here. This is wonderful. And I do believe that that is the talent that we have waiting for us to come in and fill in behind us, but there aren't enough. So we need to invest more in education, all the way down to our secondary education level, our community colleges, our 4 years, and our graduate schools, so that we will have the people to invest the time and energy into technology, into the issues that we have facing us, so that we can carry this message forward. The other thing that we need to do is to have a stronger message from all of us. We need to become missionaries. We need to become passionate about what we mean and what we do in the levels and areas of conservation around the country. Each and every one of you has an expertise in some area. You need to become a zealot. You need to become a person who will go out and advocate for precision agriculture and conservation measures everywhere you go. We saw a young man yesterday come up here and talk about cleaning up the Mississippi River. Can one person make a difference? I think so. Can you make a difference? I think so. I can't tell you how excited I get every morning knowing that I have the opportunity to go to the Department of Agriculture and work on something that I believe so strongly in, and that is in the conservation of our resources in America. I work every day to meet that challenge because I think it's incredibly important that we inspire the people that work in our department, that we inspire those people around the country that are our partners as we go forward in working on conservation in this country. There are so many things that we need to do, so many things that we have to look at. And I don't think you're going to see any changes in the Farm Bill coming forward that will alarm you or concern you, because the conservation title that we have in there is not going to change. In fact, we're going to strengthen it. We think we're going to do a great deal to add to our ability to bring more conservation practices to more people. Now, inside NRCS, we're going to do a lot of different things, but not the least of those is that we're going to make sure that we have the right people doing the right things in the right place at the right time. NRCS is going through a transition. They're moving from Natural Resources and Environment sub-agency over to this new FPAC, the Farm Production and Conservation area. This has not been easy, and it will not be easy. Change in government is one of the hardest things in the world to do. The only place I found where people were more averse to change was at a university. You think about startling and scaring someone, go in and talk to a room full of faculty members about change, particularly those that are tenured. We don't need no stinking change. So, I couldn't believe it. I will say this, just off the cuff here, that I've had a lot of hard jobs in my life, and being a college professor was not one of them. I so enjoyed the opportunity to stand in front of my students, and I was just relating to one of my colleagues here this morning about some of my experiences, and there's something about an 8 o'clock class that brings you back to the reality of life. When you have students show up with the hair still wet, they're still wearing pajamas. It's 15 below zero, and they're wearing bunny slippers. I know our Tennessee grad has never seen that or done that, but that happens all the time, particularly in an 8 o'clock class. I did enjoy that. I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. So I tell you, facing audiences and opportunities like this are far more important to me than that right now. I do want to finish up here with a couple of thoughts. And I think it's important for us to remember that as we go through these transitions and changes, people oftentimes have anxiety and trepidation over change, and particularly in government. Well, I want to assure all of the NRCS employees out there, I've got your back. I'm here to make sure that your equities are protected. I'm here to make sure that the culture of NRCS is not lost, but also to let you know that we're going to take a long, hard look at how we do business, and we're going to do business better. We're going to be more effective. We're going to give you the time, the tools, and the training you need to go out and make sure that you have the opportunity to create those relationships at the local level, to have those partnerships that you need to be strong and effective in what we do, to have the research support from USDA and other agencies to make sure that you have the big data and big science to go out here and make sure that we're making the best decisions with the best people at the best time. I'm going to go ahead and conclude right now, and I know you have a couple of questions, and then I'll have just a couple of closing remarks. So I think we have the questions are already canned, so not that I've seen them. We could do the Johnny Carson Karnak thing here. So.
I don't have my hat to do the Swami. So there's advantages to having open mics. I'll go ahead and take the question first. Recently, Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue released USDA's 2018 Farm Bill principles. Can you tell us more about what USDA is seeking with regard to soil and water conservation?
Again, I think it's very important. Thank you. It's very important to understand that we're not seeing any diminishing of that area at all. The Title II, that's the Title II of the Farm Bill. For those of you that are Farm Bill aficionados, the conservation title. I think what you may see is an effort to consolidate some of the programs now, to cut down on the paperwork, to reduce the transaction costs that are associated with that. But I don't think you're going to see any diminishing of the funds that are involved or the efforts that we have. We're not going to really change any of that. What I do think we want to do is find ways to balance, in a very dramatic fashion, balance the issues associated with getting production on good producing land and getting marginal production land out of production. This does a tremendous amount for a lot of other reasons. One, it helps us preserve the land. It maybe make the land healthier, for sure, but the other part of it is it'll help us with raising commodity prices, which is important. So the more land we get into conservation efforts, the better off we're going to be.
Thank you. The second question I have is from First Vice President Tim Palmer.
Mr. Crowder, could I go first?
Sure, it's really bright.
So, Dr. Clovis, I'm Ian Cunningham. I'm a local Soil Conservation District board member and NACD soil health champion from southwest Minnesota, just up the road from your home in northwest Iowa. How can our conservation delivery team and the citizens we serve better tell our stories on the successes of locally led voluntary conservation as opposed to the alternative of mandatory regulations?
I think the voluntary conservation is probably the strength of our programs. I think you're absolutely right. But I think that, again, I go back to the point I made about being a missionary. I think that one of the things that we find that is very important for us is that we have to tell our story better. We're working on that at NRCS, but at NRCS, that's a national level issue. So we're going to talk about conservation at a national level. We're going to talk about environmental science. We're going to talk about climate hubs. We're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about all of those other factors. But what really needs to be talked about is the impact that you can have at the local level. Think about how we're going to clean up the issues associated. Let's take the Chesapeake Bay area. Are we ever going to be able to go out there and say, pronounce to ourselves that, yes, we've cleaned up the Chesapeake Bay? Well, perhaps in a generation we can, but we're going to clean it up one estuary at a time, one field at a time, one effort at a time. So we have to stay focused, but we have to have a plan. And I think the other part of this is that we have to share this information. So if you have success in one part of the country, we need to make sure that we know that, so that if what you're doing is successful, we can share that with other people that may have similar situations. So this, again, I think is a communications issue. It is part of your missionary work. It's part of the effort. If you need support, then you need to let the state and the national government know that, so that we can provide that support to help get your message out better. Because I really think that we do have a messaging problem when it comes to conservation. And I think that this is one of the things that we're going to work on, and you'll see more on this as we go forward.
Thank you. And that was Ian Cunningham. Next question will be from Tim Palmer.
Dr. Clovis, Tim Palmer, Soil and Water Commissioner from Madison County, Iowa. Would you discuss the role that Secretary Perdue and the USDA believes conservation districts and our partners play in the conservation delivery now and in the future?
Well, again, I think that all of this begins at the local level on up. I think at every level above the local level, what we should be doing is facilitating and supporting and providing those issues that you need at the local level. So the national government should never come in and dictate anything. What the national government ideally should do is to be able to provide those resources that are not available at the state level. And the state needs to provide those resources at the local level that aren't available there. So whether that's communications, or if it's technical assistance or financial assistance, or whatever those things are, it ought to be a facilitative arrangement rather than a one-size-fits-all. This is one of the things I think is critical for us in conservation. We need a level of granularity in conservation that is not necessarily seen in other areas. Every part of this country is different. Every part of this country has different issues. There are regional issues we need to address, but every part of the country, we have to go out there because the soil is different, the geography is different, the crops are different, the production is different, and we have all of this has to be taken into consideration. So we have to be focused on being specific when it comes out to fixing and paying attention to the conservation needs of those producers that are in our areas of concern. But it starts at the local level, and then those of us that are at higher levels of government, need to be there to facilitate, support, and protect your interest as we go forward. Thank you very much. I want to finish just on one thing. I wore my wings today on my suit for a reason. One of the things that we all do, and every one of you in here does every day, is you're in here because you have committed your life and your livelihoods, many of you, to service. My father was a veteran. My brother was a veteran. Most of my uncles were veterans. My son is a veteran. We chose service. I hope all of you will commit yourselves to that very same thing. I hope you will all commit yourselves today to go out and continue this effort that we have to have if we are to preserve the resources of this nation, if we are to have these resources available for our children and their children, if we are to have the best soil, the greatest production, the best forests, the most beautiful landscapes, and the best wildlife production that we have in this country, we have to do this through our service. I chose service in my life. I completed last year 50 years of service to the federal government in one capacity or another. 50 years. I do that because I have never found in my life any other thing I could have done, and I could have done a lot of things, that brought me the satisfaction of serving the flag of this nation, the people of this nation, and the Constitution of this nation. Thank you very much.
Dr. Clovis, thank you for your service. Thank you for joining us here today, and thank you for your support of conservation.